Now when it comes to video production, an often overlooked aspect of it is your audio. It's something I pay a lot of attention to and put in far more effort than is actually required to make the audio on these videos sound good. And that effort is often not going to be noticed by many people because they'll be watching a video on a phone and it will just sound like rubbish, particularly my voice. Although I sound even worse on MacBook Pro speakers, interestingly, it causes some distortion. But either way, I do put that effort in. And an important part of your audio setup is finding a microphone that works for your voice. And that is obviously quite difficult for me. And I've been through a bunch of them. I find that Sennheiser microphones tend to suit my voice the best. I currently use a set of Rode Wireless Pro microphones and they're very good, but again the built-in equalizer curve of those microphones isn't really correct for me, and I spend quite a lot of time tweaking it in post, which isn't ideal. I had a set of DJI wireless mics in the past and those sounded dreadful for me, even though I liked how they worked. So it is quite a personal thing. All of this is a long preamble to say this is a sponsored video by Saramonic, and this is a newish microphone that they've got out and they wanted me to make a video about it. It's called the Saramonic Air. It's about £150, so it's a little bit more expensive than things like the DJI Mic Mini, but it's notably cheaper than things like the standard Rode Wireless Go's, I think, whatever they're called now, and much cheaper than the Rode Wireless Pros I otherwise use. There are some advantages over some of the cheaper microphones, and there are some disadvantages as compared to the more expensive ones. So we're going to take a bit of a look at it. Keep in mind it's a sponsored video, as always, but I wouldn't be making it if I didn't think that they were interesting microphones, and if I didn't actually like how they sounded for my voice. I think they sound pretty good, frankly, and they're very compact as well. So the microphones come in a snazzy little hard case, and this has a neat feature of showing its battery level on a little display. I rather like that. Charges up all of the devices inside it, like everything else in this market segment does. So it takes a couple of transmitters, comes with a couple of transmitters and a receiver. It also holds a few accessories, including the wind muffs, which I think is a nice touch. They don't always fit in these sorts of cases, and they fit either attached to the microphones or separate. On the receiver, it has two connectors. It has either a hot/cold shoe adapter clip, or it has a USB-C adapter. If you have the USB-C connector attached, the receiver will fit back into the case with that still attached. However, that's not the case for the hot or cold shoe clip. You have to remove that in order to fit the receiver back into the case to charge, which is a bit unfortunate. There's another slight design quibble I have with the clip as well, in that when you use it in a hot or cold shoe, it tilts the screen of the receiver away from you. If you're behind the camera, that is, and I think that's something that could be improved upon in a future version. Overall though, I like what comes with it, and there's a few extra accessories in a separate pouch as well, like a 3.5mm jack cable and a couple of lapel microphones, which we'll cover a little bit later. These have a different connector to what you would normally see. They don't have a 3.5mm jack connector. That's because it wouldn't fit, I imagine. But the solution is a very bespoke connector, which obviously has its own downsides as well. Overall, I like the case. I like that it has a window in it and you can see the charging state through it. That's something I haven't seen from many other manufacturers, and I think it's quite well thought out. Now there is one feature that these microphones have that my Rode Wireless Pros do not. Something that we're starting to see in the market a little bit more now, and that is built-in noise cancellation. And this is a feature that I wouldn't personally use that much, but it does work quite well. And the reason I wouldn't use it is just that I like being able to improve things later, and if I record with noise cancellation on, well, that background noise is gone forever. If I have any issues, there's nothing to recover. And these microphones are consistent with everything else on the market, and they don't have a feature for outputting a non-noise cancelled track. These microphones, like a lot of others, have a safety track, so you can have track 1 be your normal output volume and track 2 be 6 decibels lower to account for any particularly loud noises, because this isn't a 32-bit flow recorder. And that's nice, but it would be kind of a cool feature if you could have noise cancellation on track 1 and then have it not output to track 2, so your safety track can be used as a noise cancellation safety track as well. Maybe they could add that in a future firmware update. That'd be quite a cool feature. But I do think the noise cancellation on these work quite well. Come to a part of Cardiff that's got a reasonable amount of background noise, although it's gone slightly quieter right now. But as the traffic starts back up again, which it is, we can try the first level of noise cancellation. So this is a level that is supposed to maintain the ambient sound. I don't think this works perfectly. I think it kind of sounds like I'm in a toilet, particularly with my head down the bowl. I think it's kind of got that weird ceramic ring to it. You might need headphones in order to hear this. But what I think is much more impressive is the second level. This is the one where it is removing all background noise. I think this does a really good job. It surprisingly doesn't truncate too much of my voice. This is something that I have found with noise cancellation, even decent software ones. My voice apparently just sounds like the background murmur in a pub, and therefore I get removed quite a lot. This seems to be working really well, and I'm quite impressed. It doesn't have too many artifacts, it doesn't sound too unnatural, and if you add back in some ambient noise, it will sound really quite good. And especially if you've got a little bit of music and things, no one's really going to notice it being slightly robotic, which is effectively what a lot of noise cancellation tends to do. I've certainly over noise cancelled some of my recordings in the past, and there are some tweaks and some tricks that I've come across. I tend to use Isotope RX to denoise my recordings, but I've also been using, more often now, DaVinci Resolve's voice isolation feature, which is very impressive. But an interesting trick for something like this is that you can use that in combination with these noise cancelled recordings, and it just seems to get rid of any little artifacts. It sort of seems to round it off quite well, and it's quite an interesting combination, as you can hear now. I'm applying it to this section. I think that's quite a nice way of being able to edit it. So overall, the noise cancellation feature on this is one that I probably personally wouldn't use on most of my recordings, but I would use it when recording in a city, say on my phone, if I'm doing shorts, things like that. It is a feature I'd use, and I do like being able to use these microphones on my phone. It's very compact, it's easy to fit in a pocket, the adapter just plugs straight into your phone, and it works in the video recording application I use. It's a nice thing to use, and I would use noise cancellation in situations like that. As you can hear, I'm on the lapel mic now, and I think they sound really good. It's got a really round sound, and I think that's for a couple of reasons. Number one, the capsule faces away from your body, which I think gives you a rounder sound, and it's also the largest lapel mic I've ever had. It's very big, and there's a couple of things to that, I suppose. Number one, I think it sounds better for it. I think it's got better low frequency response, and therefore my voice will sound better. But the downside is that I don't think you're gaining much in terms of size over using the very small transmitter. So I think that's kind of interesting. It doesn't come with a furry windshield, but you can pick up aftermarket ones of those without too much trouble. And I think it's interesting because it isn't matched like the Rode Wireless Pro, but that's not a feature that's very common in the market. Not many manufacturers are matching the capsules across the lapel mic and the transmitter. That's a nice feature. It means that when you're mixing the audio later, the two things sound the same if you've mixed and matched them. But honestly, I don't use the lapel mics all that often. There are some benefits to using them, but especially with these smaller microphones, I'd probably be using this 75% of the time. It's nice to have, though, on those occasions when you do want to place it on more awkward clothing, things like that. It's a nice thing to have, and it does set it apart a little bit in this part of the market. So I think it's interesting. I actually find the connector very convenient because I don't like locking connectors on these sorts of things. I will fumble it at some point, and I would much rather yank the cable out than snap the cable or destroy the transmitter, which I think I'd be very prone to doing. So I overall quite like this setup, and I think it's a nice lapel mic, even if you don't end up using it all the time. Well, it's a brilliant day to do audio recordings. Never mind. So I've got the Rode Wireless Pro on now as well. This is how I sound raw on this microphone, and it sounds quite good. It has a built-in EQ curve that will be good for most people. The vast majority of people will sound better on this out of the box than on most other microphones. It has quite a rounded, sort of closed sound, kind of like a podcast microphone, and that sounds quite professional for most people's voices. It's a nice sort of sound. but for me, it kind of loses the character of my voice. I don't have a lot of mid-range frequencies. I've got a lot of chest resonance, and I've got a lot of sibilant, sizzling sausages sounds, and it's not ideal. So I EQ this, and this is how I sound with my plug-in arrangement on it. So this is in DaVinci. So you can see I've got a different EQ curve that brings back some of the bass. I then have a second EQ curve that removes a whistle from my nose that this picks up, which I have never heard on a single other microphone. It's just one of those frequencies that it's really resonant with. I don't know why. It's very irritating, actually. But I've removed that. And then I have a mouth declicker to get rid of the lip smacking sounds, and I have a de-esser to remove the remaining sibilant sounds to reduce them. This sounds quite good. For the vast majority of people, I think these sound great. For me, it just doesn't quite sound natural. It sounds a little bit odd to me, and it doesn't sound to me like I sound to me. But obviously I sound to me different to how I sound to you if you meet me in person, because, you know, I'm hearing myself inside my own head. But I do think it sounds nice, even if I don't think it sounds entirely like my voice. Now, on this mic, on the Saramonic Air, I think it has a flatter response by default, and that's good. It gives you an opportunity to EQ it and make it sound different. It gives you a sort of a flatter starting point. And I do think it sounds quite good. So this is the raw sound of this, but I think for most people, you're going to sound less professional by default on a flatter response mic or a more open sounding microphone like Sennheiser microphones than you would with this default EQ curve of the Rode. But if you want to do some post-processing, like this, so I'm going to now apply my settings to this, I think it sounds good. It gives me some nice options. It allows me to get a sort of wider sound from my voice, but it does bring in more of those sibilant sounds that the Rode is muting by default. On the plus side, it doesn't seem to pick up the nasal whistle, which is nice, but it does pick up more of those sibilant, sizzling sausages sounds, and so I have a strong de-esser on that to remove those. I think overall, though, it's got a nice sound. I think the Rode sounds better. You would hope so. It's double the price. But I do think the audio quality out of these is really decent, and is one of the reasons why I was actually interested in doing a video about them, because when I find nice microphones that I think perform well, particularly for their price, then I like to take a look at them. In fact, the microphone that I use for my desk, my open diaphragm microphone, which I think suits my voice really well, is a £40 microphone from Thomann in Germany, an own brand one. It sounds good. I know a lot of people use things like the Shure SM7B for podcasting and stuff. I don't love the sound of that for my voice. I use a £40 microphone. There are a lot of variances in how microphones sound, and it's nice to find more affordable options that I think sound good for your voice. Well, that's it for this video about the Saramonic Air microphones. Overall, I think they are good value. I think the price point is good, and I think they offer a lot for that price. I like the sound, and I think for my voice they tend to suit it better than some of the other mics in this segment. Now, there are a couple of downsides. The clip, as I mentioned already, and the transmitter button I think is quite easy to press and accidentally turn it off, but that's kind of consistent across a lot of these sort of things, to be honest, and I actually haven't hit it like that in practice anyway, so probably a bit of a moot point. When it comes to batteries, the battery life has been really good, but like every other 2.4 GHz mic set on the market, they have built-in, non-user replaceable, realistically, batteries. And now Curtis Judd, who has a fantastic channel, and I'll put a link to his over there, has a problem with this, and I tend to agree. I would love to see AAA or AA battery support in microphones in this segment. If you want that, you're going to be spending £1,000 on a VHF set. That's quite irritating. So I'd love to see that in the 2.4 GHz market. I don't know if it's a power consumption thing, but it is frustrating. If they can't do that, I'd like to see the battery pack be a plug-in battery pack that you can easily replace, because that prolongs the life of the devices. Now, I did ask Saramonic about the battery replacements on this. They said it does have a 2-year warranty, and I believe they'll replace the batteries after that, but you might need to double check that as well. I would like to see reusable batteries come into the market, but they're no different to anyone else in this segment, so this is really what you're looking at across that part of the market. Some manufacturers like Rode, I think, are offering even longer warranties, and they're starting to put more effort into the environmental aspect of these products. But let me know your thoughts down below about the sound of these, because I think they sound quite good, but it's all very subjective. Now, I think the vast majority of people would probably prefer the sound of my voice on the Rode Wireless Pro. Not surprising, it's a more expensive microphone, but it's also more standard. You're used to hearing people with that microphone sound now, and it's much like in the podcast segment, where the Shure SM7B has become a staple. So it becomes the podcast sound. That's what people expect you to sound like on a podcast. That doesn't necessarily mean it's right for your voice, but I'd be curious to know your thoughts. Do put them down below. Any suggestions for other microphones you think I should check out? If you'd like to see more audio stuff from me, I'd love to hear from you. I'm going to go and get out of the rain now, I think. It's been quite damp, and it's due to rain for about 2 weeks. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.